Hey, Chad.
Hey, Cerina.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Edu Life.
Edu Life who?
Edu Life episode 10. Woo! Hey everyone, so unfortunately, exam time is coming. So you've heard the usual, sleep well, eat well, all that jazz. But what are some new tips? So why don't we talk to Chad right here, and he's going to give us some additional tips for success in studying.
Thanks, Cerina. The first cool study tip that I've found is focusing on the music that you're listening to while you're studying. Most people might put on the radio or listen to something that they're interested in, but studies have shown that this actually kind of distracts your brain. So instead of Lil Wayne or Drake, maybe mix in some Mozart or some Bach, because classical music will help you focus but not distract your brain. The other cool tip I found is recreating your exam writing environment while you're studying. So if that means wearing your favorite PJs, chewing gum, and maybe not listening to music at all because you can't when you write your exams, try it while you study, and it'll help you recall that information in the exam.
And Chad, you forgot, if all else fails, make sure you dress for success. Because if you dress for success, you'll feel good going to the exam and coming out of the exam. Trust me.
But really what Cerina's trying to say is study hard.
Now we have the amazing and inspiring Zahra Kasamali. She is a PhD student at the secondary education at the U of A, and she's here today to talk to us about aspects of inclusion in a multicultural classroom. So let's delve right in. So Zahra, first of all, what is your background and how has it led you into studying this area?
So right now I'm currently doing my PhD in secondary education.
Congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And prior to this, I was really exploring how we can talk about the conflation of faith and politics, especially when it comes to really pertinent discussions that come up in our social studies classrooms. And I was looking at how anti-racism and how talking about, giving attention to people who've been typically marginalized in our grad narratives, especially in social studies, how we can better account for that. And what I've noticed in time was that my typical frameworks of discussing these matters within the frameworks of anti-racism and prior to that with multiculturalism would actually contribute to the problems that I was actually seeking to alleviate and would actually obliterate some very important stories and in the end pit particular identities against another. So now what I'm trying to look at is how we can talk about inclusion in ways that don't deal with pitting identities against another, or this idea of including one image to account for a particular representation of a group that may typically have not been included within our Canadian imaginary.
Yeah, wow, that is amazing. I'm blown away right now. Are you blown away? I certainly am. So my second question is, what are some tips and advice you could give with your area of expertise for undergrads right now, studying this area of an inclusive classroom?
Well, Cerina, that's a great question, and I'm glad that you asked it. I think if I think back to teaching and being an undergrad, there is this sense that we had to be experts as teachers going into the classroom. And I think that's something that can be incredibly daunting, and I want to emphasize that, we're always becoming. And especially given the context of our increasing immigration in Alberta today and talks about inclusive practice, as we can see with our former interview with Dr. Bill Dunn, we can think about inclusion in terms of understanding, accounting for everyone in terms of, human encounters, that when we teach, this isn't just about teaching students in a way that objectifies people, which is something that we want to be really cognizant of, I would say. We have to remember that on our day-to-day communications, this is again about encounters and the importance of human relationships. And I think something to keep in mind before we begin teaching is a very poignant question that Professor Kent Denhire poses, which is we need to think about what must happen before the teaching begins, which really relates to our assumptions. And of course, quite often, our assumptions, we don't realize that they're there floating around. And as any human being, we of course have them. And I think an excellent way to begin this process when we think about inclusive classrooms, when we think about, the multicultural nature of this country, is to think about what is underlying our assumptions of particular peoples and ourselves and how this will come out in how we teach and in our encounters with our students.
So one thing that Zahra touched upon that I really, really think is important is the beauty of lifelong learning. So with that, the last question is, are there any comments that you'd like to talk about in terms of lifelong learning learning in multicultural classrooms?
Certainly. Well, again, that's a really excellent point and question. I think that what we need to keep in mind is how sometimes we may conceptualize time. And we may think that, once we've learned a particular concept or been in a particular course, for example, taking a course on Aboriginal education as one example, or perhaps a course in religious studies, we may think, awesome, yes, which we might think that we know everything that we need to know about a particular group of people, about ourselves, and about that subject area. And I want to emphasize, let's when we have that assumption, let's stand back and stop right there and think, actually, no, I don't know everything that there is to know. And that we need to look at this as always something, in being, in process, and that this is infinite in a way, and that learning is lifelong, and we can't just assume that just because you've taken a course that means that we understand everything.
Well, Zahra, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely a pleasure. I'm going to give you a legitimate handshake as well.
Awesome.
Do you want to be me next semester?
Or me.
If you want to host Edu Life, email Derek at the link below.
Hey everyone, it's Lindsay here, and I have the pleasure of introducing Crystal. She's the Undergraduate Research Coordinator for the Undergraduate Research Initiative. So could you tell me a little bit more about it, Crystal?
So the Undergrad Research Initiative is an office on campus that helps support students in getting involved in research opportunities across all disciplines, and any type of research. So we have a very broad definition of what undergraduate research is. So it's everything from learning about research from your professors in your classes to getting involved in some research-based courses, learning the methods of your discipline, or doing mentored research opportunities with a prof where you go off and do kind of a 4-month or an 8-month kind of project one-on-one with a prof. So there's a huge spectrum of research that goes on, and we try to get undergrads involved in as many types of research as possible.
Oh, that sounds awesome. So us ed students can come visit you then, hey?
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. Well, actually, the main reason we came here today was for a thing called FURCA. Now, what is FURCA?
Okay, so FURCA is the Festival of Undergraduate Research and Creative Activities. It's the university's first ever campus-wide festival celebrating undergraduate research. So there's always been a lot of individual activities and symposia happening in individual departments. Student groups have always kind of done events to try to promote undergraduate research, and what we've done this year is bring those events together for the first time under one umbrella. So there's about 30 different events happening over the month of November, so something almost every day, representing a huge diversity of disciplines. So at the Undergraduate Research Symposium alone, there's about 114 students representing 10 different disciplines. So a huge mix, and lots of excitement going on for the whole month.
That sounds pretty phenomenal. I'll have to check some of these out. What are some ones you'd highlight? I know I've heard about there's the Undergraduate Research Symposium, as well as Nerd Night. Yeah, do you want to enlighten me on some of those options that they have? I know it's about halfway over, but there's still, like you said, plenty to go. What are some that you might highlight for us to check out?
Okay, so absolutely, the Undergraduate Research Symposium is happening on Friday, November 22nd in CSIS from 10 to 3, and that will be a combination of poster presentations, oral presentations, and various demonstrations by students. Again, a huge range of disciplines represented there. And then November 28th, we're very excited about Nerd Night, which is an event that happens at the Citadel, and it happens about once a month, and this is the first time they're bringing in undergraduate students, and we have a few of our URI undergraduate researcher stipend recipients who are going to be speaking, so that's pretty cool. And then next week we're also doing something called the City as the Learning Laboratory with the Center for Public Involvement and Community Service Learning, looking at opportunities for students to engage in community-based research. So that would be a really good thing, maybe even for some of the ed students to come and check out.
For sure, that sounds phenomenal. I'll have to check this out. And as well as, are you hoping this will be an annual thing after this?
Hopefully, yeah. There's so much interest from faculties and student groups. Even after we had 30 plus events, we still had people contacting us saying, how can we get involved? So I think there's huge momentum for this kind of thing on campus.
That's pretty phenomenal. Thank you very much, Crystal, and I hope to see you out there.
What is your background in education, and how has it led you to where you are today?
Well, I've had a long background in education. I come from a family that included educators. I've always been interested in languages, so that's what got me into second language education. In fact, I first moved to Canada from the United States because I was interested in languages and wanted to go to university in Montreal, a French-speaking city.
Wow. Do you speak French?
I do speak French. I used to teach French at high school.
That is amazing. So moving on, let's delve right into it. What is exactly the difference between ELLs and ESLs? I know when I first came into an education class, I was like, what is that? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, the difference is it's not an easy distinction, but I think, and some people use the terms interchangeably, but I think the main difference is that ESL usually means English as a second language. ELL means English language learners. So the problem with ESL, so ELL is starting to replace the term ESL. A lot of people have objected to the term ESL because of the word second. So some people think, some people speak more than two languages, they speak many languages, and they might be learning English as their third, fourth, or fifth language. And so that's the reason why people have objected to the term second. To a linguist, a second language is just any language learned after their first language. But since other people don't know that that's how the term second is intended to be interpreted, they interpret it differently. So now some people have asked that the word ESL be replaced more and more with ELL. Other people have suggested replacing the S, instead of S being second, S being subsequent. But English as a subsequent language is not very catchy, so you can imagine that term's having a little bit of trouble catching on.
Well, I used to be an ESL student, so I kind of know where you're coming from there. My second question is, as pre-service teachers and people going to their IPT and APT, what are some words of wisdom or what are some challenges with ESL and ELLs that we should be kind of cognizant about in the classroom?
I think one of the most important things is what some people have referred to as double the work. So ELLs have to do double the work. This is an idea that was coined by Deborah Short and Shannon Fitzsimmons. And the idea is that English language learners are not only learning the school content that all students are learning, at the same time they're having to learn the language which they need in order to understand the content. And so it really puts them in a difficult situation. I think if most of us were studying something in a language that wasn't our first language and we experienced challenges because of that, I think most of us, but yet we were being assessed just like everyone else, I think a lot of us would think that was unfair. And yet it's happening to thousands of ELLs around Alberta every day.
That's very true. And just addressing that, how should we address these challenges in the classroom? I know that's a very big topic, but what are some strategies that we could take on to help the ELLs in the classroom?
Well, there are a lot of strategies that teachers can take. One is to be aware of the importance of language and to be aware of the language that you're using as a teacher, the words you're choosing to use. Just thinking about what can I do as a teacher to help someone understand. There are a lot of strategies teachers can use, using non-linguistic supports, visuals, demonstrations. All of these things can help students understand even when they don't have a lot of language proficiency. There are many different teaching strategies, way too many to go into, but activating students' background knowledge, scaffolding their writing. But I think the main general idea would just to be aware of language and its importance within the classroom.
Are there any additional supports that we can give to ELLs or ESLs in the classroom?
I think another important thing for teachers to remember is the social needs of English language learners. Oftentimes someone, because they don't have a lot of language proficiency, might have trouble meeting people, might have trouble expressing their personality. Oftentimes they might feel isolated or that they don't truly or fully belong. ESL students run the risk of just becoming a quiet person who sits in the back of the room, and I think it's really important to be aware of that and to make sure it doesn't happen. I think anything teachers can do to get to know all of their students, to learn that English language learners are very interesting people who have very interesting stories. It's just not always easy for them to share those stories. So whatever a teacher can do to ensure that students are included in the classroom and that students know that the teacher is there to support them, not just academically, but in terms of their full development.
Right. Wow, words of wisdom. And delving right into another topic, so what are some courses that we could take as undergrads? Because what if you're like, I don't really know much about this, but I want to know more? What are some courses that you could take to learn more about this topic?
Well, one course that I teach is EDSE 307. The course is Language, Literacy, and Society in Educational Context, and it's a relatively new course required for all secondary students. It helps students prepare to work in classrooms that are culturally diverse, linguistically diverse, helps students work with any adolescent student who would still be developing their academic language skills.
Right. And is there any graduate courses that you're teaching? I know you do a lot of supervising, so.
There are graduate courses as well. I teach graduate courses on second language education. Colleagues of mine teach courses as well.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dunn. It's a pleasure to have you on our show. I'm sure you enjoyed our segment as well. Thank you so much.